Retail podcast, and I'm joined today by someone I came across on LinkedIn, Kareem Dulkay. And he's also called the Fresh Prince of Retail. And if you see any of his posts, they're really, really high energy. You get this feeling from Kareem that when he walks in a room with retailers, that he just brings this really, I suppose, enthusiastic, high energy with him to the table. And I was intrigued watching Kareem's posts on LinkedIn and just wanted to know more about him. So I invited him onto the podcast. He's based in the UK and he's a great story behind him, how he got into retail. His name stands out for anyone that has ever watched the TV show. Will definitely align to this with the Fresh Prince of Retail. So thanks for joining me, Kareem. Tell us a little bit about your retail journey, because we'd like to know how you got to this point.
Yes, brilliant introduction. Thank you very much. I feel all humbled now, and I guess I need to dance and do all that energy to, live up to the build up. But yeah, been in retail all my life. Have Moroccan parents. They came to the UK. I know I'm going right back to the beginning, but why the hell not? And was working, on the side to supplement my education, and fell in love with retail when I was doing that. I did a general management degree, didn't really know what I wanted to do next. Then I stayed at home to go to uni and stuff. And then I decided, okay, I was kind of jealous of everyone who'd moved out. So I went to work in London, worked in Harrods, which was a phenomenal experience. I think the best of the best kind of retail training. It was very strict. It was very regimented. You had to be clean shaven. There was it was like going through a terminal in terms of the security when you're going in and out of the building. I worked there for 1 year, so, saw some mega stars, Michael Jackson, Madonna, a couple of the James Bond, Sean Connery and Roger Moore were there and stuff. So unbelievable kind of training. I then went to work in Selfridges for a while. And whilst I was working in Selfridges, I got into training development. And I totally love that. And coincidentally, when I was at college and school and university and stuff, I was always the shy kid. I was always the kid that would never put my hand up or until I 100% knew the answer. Then when I was in Selfridges, they kind of really pushed me. It was a new store in Manchester. The Trafford Centre had just been built. And it was kind of like, you're one of the first managers we're taking on. We're going to train you, and then you're going to train 500 people. Go. And I think that really took me out of my, comfort zone. And I had to then become good at training. The first time I stood in front of people, I went quiet for 2 minutes. And then there was a film called Pulp Fiction. And I remember that line that was like, was that a comfortable silence? And everyone laughed. And then from then it was all good. I then went to work for lots of other retailers. I went to work for a company called Aldo, who I'd worked for 16 years, and traveled the world with them, across the world, Saudi, Egypt, Dubai, Jordan. And then from there, there was a guy. I'd gone into sales and operations, even though training development was my real passion. I got into sales and operations because that's where the money was. So I kind of followed the money. Love smashing targets, worked with loads of high performing teams and, all over the world and stuff. But then something kicked in with me when the guy came from the UK and he did like this, 1 day assertiveness course. And that just made me think, I really love that. But, there's so much opportunity to do more of that. And what I really love in retail is not only smashing, the KPIs and the sales and all that, but it's really seeing people develop. So that's my pride, my passion. I came back to the UK, started to get into coaching, found out that coaching wasn't training, it wasn't mentoring, it was a very different thing. And I think my unique style is that I do mix coaching, training, mentoring, and retail operations. So that's me in a nutshell.
I love that story, Kareem, and thanks for sharing it. I suppose
Pleasure.
on your journey, you've traveled a lot. You said you worked in different countries. What was kind of the differences, or what was the challenges? Working with working in your own market, working in the UK. You probably knew that market really well. Maybe going over to other countries, maybe that didn't know the brand as well, building the brand.
Yeah, it was total culture shock for me. And even though I was going to Saudi Arabia and I've got Moroccan parents and I'm used to the Muslim religion and stuff. When I first went there, it was like almost like forget what you've ever learned in the UK. That's not going to work here. you need to adapt. And it was kind of more about the kind of the heart, the louder you shout as a manager, the better of a manager you are. And that was obviously kind of against my philosophy. So it was really interesting. But then obviously they have a lot of things in terms of development and stuff, which I didn't really realize. But they're very structured, they're very organized. And I think, you know, the different, when you're in a different store, you're almost like a different person, whether that's in the UK or anywhere you are, and you can always learn. So I just quickly learned to adapt to the market, adapt to the people. And I think in retail, if you're good at people skills, you're used to working with lots of different people, lots of different cultures, and that really supports you. And I feel ultimately that retail is about servant leadership. You know, that's one of my guiding philosophies. And I think if you look after your team and look after your people, irrespective of where you are in the world, then it's going to be fantastic, and you're definitely going to bond with people and have an amazing atmosphere and vibe.
I loved hearing that, what you just said there, that retail leadership is servant leadership, because there's a great book, I think we all know, the Simon Sinek book. Yeah, and he talks about servant leadership, and I think that's so important. Because what you said there, when you look after the team will look after the store for you. And I think that's so important. And building that team.
Especially in retail, because retail is all about, you know, how the customer, you know, that customer journey from the second they come in. And if they're not happy and they're not fulfilled, how do you expect them to be happy on the shop floor and happy with one another and develop? And, you know, employee engagement is the word of the, you know, the century, I think. Especially after COVID and all that kind of stuff. So it's really about creating that energy, that vibe, that gamification on that shop floor, and that incredible experience that's become even more important as we go on.
Yeah. I suppose you know yourself, I suppose, being in retail, and I was also in retail, that when you go on that shop floor, there is a personality to it. There is an atmosphere, and you feel it when you go on it, and the customer feels that as well. Okay.
Yeah.
And I always think it's not really look, you can have the best product in the world, but it's the people that create that environment, that feeling that you're invoked when you go on that shop floor. And sometimes I've gone in, and it could be it could be a multi-chain business where they have 40 or 50 stores, and you go into one in one location, and maybe 3 hours up the road or wherever that is, you go into the same store, different location, and you get a really different experience, Kareem. Okay.
Yeah, 100%. And this, I can really relate to that. Like in Saudi, in Riyadh, like there was, and they have massive malls. The malls are huge. I thought the malls in the UK were big, and the traffic centre and stuff. But the malls there, because of the heat, they have like fairground attractions in them. And what I found is exactly what you're just saying there, is even though one mall was, you know, there might be a mall right next to the house that they could literally walk to. People never walked in Saudi, but that they could, you know, 2 seconds away from their doorstep, but they may travel, you know, 45 minutes or 1 hour away because of the customer service was different in another mall. And I think that's a really important aspect, actually. 100%.
Yeah. And I suppose bringing it back to that kind of where it is different. And I think where maybe regional managers, area managers, in retailers struggle a little bit with what I've seen through the years, in overseeing, these they could maybe have 10 stores to look after, 15, depending on the multinational and the region or location they're in. They could be minding the London stores, and they could be doing Manchester area, wherever that is. But it was the consistency that they really struggled, that continuity within the branches.
Yeah, and it's really important for the customer to have that consistency. You know, like if a store's got great service, you really want to have the great service in the different brands. Obviously, there's regional variations. London and Manchester and, you know, Ireland, they're very, very different places. But you want that same kind of experience everywhere you go, and the same visual and all that kind of stuff, the standards. You know, when you go to, I guess, McDonald's, I know McDonald's isn't a retailer, but you know what you're going to get. That makes sense. And you know, wherever that is in the world, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get quick service, and you're going to get the same kind of Big Mac. And yeah, it's a little bit more complicated in retail than that, but I think that's ideally, a great consistency kind of model for retailers to have between the stores.
Yeah, and I think exactly. I think what you're saying there around McDonald's, and I give that in an example that you're getting food really fast. You know what the quality is like, and I think from the customer's perspective, I think sometimes retailers get caught up in, exactly what you're describing there. We get caught up in the nitty gritty. We get caught up in maybe doing shop standards. We get caught up in maybe doing security checks with our tags or whatever that is. We get caught up with, these visuals.
Yeah.
And what we've to remember is, because we're all consumers, so even the retailer can forget that they're still a consumer. And, that customer coming in the door, they don't get that, it has
they don't care. They don't care, right? And I think you spot on. Like, what I often find is sometimes when there's big visual moves, for example, and this is, great kind of example for retailers, is that they focus on that big move and almost ignore the customer. And really, it's that customer, even more so today in terms of conversion and, with less traffic coming into the stores, that the customer really is king. My dad taught me that when I was like a wee boy, and he kind of basically broke it down for me in terms of no customer equals no job. It's really that simple. But sometimes in retail, we can it becomes political, and you focus on visual merchandise and tasks and admin and all that kind of stuff, when really it's like, once you open the stores, it's almost like you're a show, like a Hollywood, Bollywood kind of show. And it's like, let's go and perform, and you're there for the customers.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're right. And I think I used to find, and I don't know if other people used to find this, where it was kind of maybe forgotten a little bit, was that you have so many departments. You've the buying department, you've maybe a branch merchandiser department, you maybe the marketing department, the HR department, the training department, then the regional manager, and then so you have maybe 6 or 7 departments feeding into that one branch, okay?
Yeah.
And they don't really talk to one another. So
don't even get me started on this point. Like I find that a lot of departments within retail, I mentioned this within my post a lot, is it's not one team. It's almost like the departmentalization. It's kind of, we're the VM team, we're the HR team, we're the loss prevention team, we're the sales and operations team, we're the store team. And it's almost like they kind of defensive of their, we've done our bit, we've, done our conversion, we've done our sales, rather than working as a team. And I think that team philosophy is really, really important. And all things, everything you do in that store, no matter if you're one store or multinational, should be about serving that customer and giving that the best of the best experience.
Yeah, it's so interesting, because this is the point I bring up, Kareem, and I've brought that point up before, that the departments can sometimes work in silos, and they don't talk to one another. So you have the manager in the store, or it could be a multi-site manager, and they're trying to execute, the VM, and then there's a marketing department going, we want you to change the signage, we're not, we've had this changeover, then the price changes, like so much is happening. They maybe don't talk to one another, and then what we end up seeing is, well, why are they focusing on tasks so much and not the customers as managers in these stores? And we're not maybe looking and standing.
And I think there's some basic things, I remember, like, in some of a lot of the retailers that they had like a service window, which was their peak hours.
Yeah.
And I think that was really good, where you could task, like, I don't know, in the morning till, let's say 10, let's say 11 kind of maximum.
Yeah.
And then from 11, 12 till like 6, you can't task.
Yeah.
And then, depending on whether you closed or not, what time your closing hours is, then again, you'd have some more tasking available at the end of the day. But then in some malls, they were kind of open till 10. So it's really that challenge. But I think some retailers who are commercial, they get deliveries at night time, they do all the merchandising, so the store's ready to go. And I think that, how I try and help is really make them focused during opening time 100% or as much as they can on the customer. Obviously, as a store manager, you've got to kind of juggle different things, and there's different things going on, and you'll have a fire, health and safety visit coming in and stuff, and you've got to be prepared for that, especially in the UK. But ultimately, it's like, how can I maximize the team and I on driving sales, because that's what retail's all about, and customer experience.
Yeah, and I think that's really important and really, really good as well for anyone that and I was listening to what you said there, and I remember back in 2007, and I learned this in Next when I worked in Next, was, we had that 12 to 4 was peak trade. So it was a non-negotiable. Anyone working on the shop floor Next were not allowed between 12 and 4 do any tasks.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, so we had to manage that, outside. So we before, and again, what you said after, and then looking at, because I think the biggest challenge at retailers at the moment is, and this is where kind of the operational overtakes the service, okay, is because they're overwhelmed with tasks. And I think you made a really valid point there, that there's ways around it. There's ways around it as in, doing certain tasks outside of trade, or bringing in a team in the morning before trade to do your deliveries and get that set up. So bringing in your team at 5, 6, 7 a.m., getting that done, or bringing them in the evening shift and getting that done, so it doesn't disrupt trade. So again,
100%. I think the retailers who are smart these days and who are conversion led. I talk a lot about outcomes, and I think what differentiates me, myself as a retail consultant and yourself, is that we drive that outcome. Seems to be a lot of retail consultants, or consultants in general, who are very fluffy and they make the training fun and all that kind of stuff. But I think ultimately the retailers that will survive in this day and age are 100% customer driven, and they've kind of learned, a few years ago you could get away with the manager being admin-y and stuff like that. In this day and age, you really can't. It's like, minimize the admin. So they just kind of get on the shop floor, drive the sales, coach on the shop floor, and everything's kind of done on the shop floor. Obviously, you have some exception, if you've just sold out of your wall and there's literally nothing on the wall, then get someone to quickly fix it. But it is a quick fix versus distracting and doing that visual merchandising when you've got your peak trading hours, for sure.
Yeah. And I think the deliverables, we touched on this before, Kareem, around, and you said it there, training within the retail market is very different to training in other markets. And especially what you touched on there is exactly what we talked about, was those deliverables, the conversion, the items per customer, the average transaction sales, the units per sales, how many's coming in the door, your footfall versus your sales. So
pounds per hour, all that kind of stuff. Is retail is super commercial, and I think it's really about understanding what those metrics are, and then making sure that you're kind of coaching on the shop floor. Obviously you can take people into a training room, and I've got an offer called Love Your Team, which does that, and it gets people off the shop floor, gets them thinking, makes them really understand what they can control. And then it talks about conversion in terms of the Fresh Prince formula, and then it's like, how can the managers really lead and inspire and make the in-store experience fun and gamification. And then it's about role play. Like, I think role play is such an old school thing. But it's like, when you get a new starter, usually what happens is you get a new starter on the first day, maybe the manager will spend a little bit of time with them, and then it's kind of like, go. And then they probably won't speak to them for the next 6 months. And for me, that's wrong. It's like, we all get better with practice and constant repetition. And that's where the focus really needs to be. And I know that's what you do, and that's a little bit of what I do as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important. The role play, and I think, Kareem, some people kind of roll their eyes a little bit when I say the
they don't like it. They don't like it, do they?
And they go, oh, great, oh, for goodness sake. But I think and as people, as humans, we actually peer-to-peer learning. We learn from one another, and that that role play piece, I think, where that comes into play is that you're doing it in, if you do that in a business, you're doing it in a safe environment. You're not, as you said there, they come in, you do a little bit of training and you fire them out. And really what you're teaching them is, by doing that and by not doing the really good training and embedding that properly, you're really teaching them to firefight, and you're teaching them that that's how we actually operate the business.
And this is the issue. This is what I think, that even with the regional managers, God bless them and stuff, no matter how amazing they are, they do spend most of the store visit is like firefighting. And I think, there's so much value in, one of the great things that I learned about Saudi and that market was they have on the weekends, the regional manager gets back on the floor and really, shows that best example. And he's obviously, speaking to customers, so learning about what's selling, what's not selling, and feeding back to the team, and also coaching the team on the shop floor and utilizing the team. One of the mistakes that I made when I was, a junior kind of manager, or learning my trade, so to speak, was that I tried to do everything and be the superhero of the store. But I learned that this person is probably the best in, selling add-on products. This person, is really good one-to-one. This person can serve like 20 people in 1 hour. And I think if you have that buddy system and put people with different people, you're going to accelerate everyone's learning so that everyone in the team can use the till, can put sales through, and goes through that whole, customer journey from the beginning until the close. And it's a warm, professional experience that is speedy as well, especially on the high street.
Yeah, I think that's really good what you touched on there. And I think for me, similar experience in that I wanted to do it all because I thought, okay, well, the team are serving the customers, I'm going to get busy at doing all the tasks. And then it got to the point where I actually wasn't able to coach or to mentor or to give them any feedback, because I was so overwhelmed with getting the tasks done, because I hadn't really divvied out the work properly. And
it's a hard balance, because sometimes if you start serving the customer and stuff, you're kind of not managing the store. I think the best kind of managers on the shop floor are the person who's almost like, the conductor of an orchestra. Is kind of serve that customer. What's going on here? Follow up. Did you ask him this? Have you, done this? And that's the kind of thing that I think is really missing on most shop floors across the nation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example. And I've just got an image in my head of a conductor in an orchestra just going like this, with the little stick. So yeah, I think that's a really good example. And we used to say, that helicopter, we used to say it's like having a helicopter, you need to be see what's going on. Where is the person? Oh, they're in the stock room. What are they doing? Oh, I don't. Okay, what are they? And within maybe 4 questions on that shop floor, where the manager doesn't even need to look around because they know where everyone is, because they're on it,
And it's that follow-up, within the sales process, So I see so many retailers, A, not approaching, B, saying, can I help you? Or going higher. And that's all they say. And for me, it's like, no, that's not how it should be. Like, just forget the sale almost. Have empathy with your customer. Talk to them about what they want to talk about. Find out what they need, not, don't have preset ideas and stuff, and work as a team and make it fun and all that kind of stuff. And the sales will naturally come from that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's the building the relationship is so important. And we used to always say that. We'd say, if someone comes in the door of your house, would you have a conversation with them?
Yeah. And that's the perfect example. I always use that example. And it's like, if I'm coming around to yours for tea and stuff, even the timing, like you wouldn't bring, hi Karim, here's the main meal. It's like you'd come, you'd welcome them, like, how was your journey? How was your trip? Have you been here before? Or that kind of stuff. Like, and then it'd be like a cup of tea, and then it'd be like some chat, and then introducing your family and all that kind of stuff. You're really like almost wine and dine. Then you bring in this, the main meal, and you're kind of saying, like, if you don't like anything, it's all good. You don't have to eat it and stuff like that. And really going through the steps. And I find retailers are too much in a hurry. Like, they kind of want to get to the chase. In an empty store, let's say there's me, you, and 4 members of staff, and one customer comes in. Well, it's very intimidating. You've got to think about how is that customer? So you kind of need to be more chilled and make them feel comfortable. Not all 5 of you go, and this is another pet hate of mine. 5 of you, can I help you? And then the second person goes, and it's like, no, like that's going to make them want to walk out.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen that. I've seen that from a retailer, and I've seen that as a customer, where you literally do the loop and you go back out, and it's so funny because I used to do store visits, and I used to bring the retail manager outside the store, and we go across the road, and the storefront is there, could be on a high street, and I'd ask them to just look at that flow of the customer coming in, and we'd find the point where they turn around and walk back out, and that was where the conversion, we were losing them. And there'd be a certain part to that front of the store where they'd walk out. And usually they'd walk out. It wasn't really the VM, case, because we had great front table, all of that. It was usually down to that approach that you talked about there. So we weren't doing it properly. We were, the retailer was, the customer was feeling that it was too hastily.
Yeah, of course.
Like they weren't able to walk in. And it was giving them that kind of perspective, what you talked about and it goes back to how do we see it through the eyes of a customer, because
100%
have blinkers on sometimes when they go into their own
and I think in the old days you used to think like the best salespeople were the people with the gift of the gab, whereas now I kind of feel it's more about that consultative selling. It's more about asking the customer what they need, and for it just to be more kind of relaxed kind of pace. And I think also customer expectations have gone higher, and they are more kind of price sensitive, and they do know the competition and all that kind of stuff. So, the staff need to know their products, and they need to know how to, it's all about relationships. That's the word that you used previously that really resonated. It's about relationships.
Yeah. And I think I think as retail is evolving, I think it's becoming more about building a relationship and building a community around your brand. And it's funny because it goes back to years and years ago. It goes back to this kind of ideology whereby, we go to the, the grocer, we go to the guy who sells us the vegetables. We're going back to the butcher again, whereas I think what happened with retail was we got in these big, huge places, whereas people now are going back to people. We see this.
Yeah, I love that. I love that focus, and this is not so much the multinationals, but the independents and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that, you will go back to someone who is amazing and gives you good service, and is really honest with you as well. You're trying a jacket, you look fabulous in the jacket you're wearing, but if I or someone else wore that jacket and it totally wasn't their color, it's the way that you kind of say it. And rather than that fakeness, like, oh, you were born to wear that jacket, right? And you might make that sale on that day, but they'll never see you again. Whereas if you're honest and kind of say, actually, that cut or that style or that color doesn't suit you, but I really recommend this, and you're coming from a genuinely good place, and you're thinking, how would I want to be treated? How would I want my family to be treated? And if you've got that integrity, even if someone doesn't buy in a retail store, but you make them feel special and you give them a compliment, like I like your earrings or whatever it may be, and it's genuine, they're going to remember that. It's going to make their day, and they're going to come back to you.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And I think it's about being authentic. I think it's about showing up as your authentic self, and in the way you come across to people, that you are being true to yourself. And regardless of you, I think, being in the doors of a business and working for a business, I think, and I think it gets forgotten a little bit about with retailers. And I talk about this in a couple of the talks, Kareem, is that sometimes we forget that, we are the brand. Okay. So they don't
100%.
I used to work for Rituals Next, all these retail, they don't really know the brand. They don't know the brand values, the mission statement, the values that everyone is talking about in-house. Okay.
They know you. And
the brand experience is you. You are the brand.
You are the brand. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, as I'm walking around retailers now, it's kind of, I'm seeing that loss of personality.
Yeah.
And I think that personality is so important. And people, all the companies have their sales scripts and, what to say and stuff. And I'm thinking, I don't want to hear a sales script. I want to hear a real, genuine, warm person who cares about me and has got my best intentions at heart. And they are, unique. Yes, they are the brand, but they're doing it in, you doing your Louise way, I do my Karim way. And, that authenticity is there.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you mentioned a word there, around, being ourselves, being heartful, I think, and being real with ourselves, and not feeling that, like you said there, that it's a script, that it's robotic almost.
Yeah.
It just doesn't align, I think. But I think people
Yeah.
pick up on that as well, Kareem. And I think it's about also, when retailers recruit people, it's just as much about that personality piece.
Yeah, for me with CVs and stuff, I remember when I was recruiting and stuff, like I wouldn't give a damn about the CV.
Yeah.
It's like I would just throw the CV away. I don't. My interviews were even unscripted. I'd just be speaking to them and say like, "What do you think of the window?" Totally like almost like random, but it's just basically seeing how that person is and how that person's personality is to speak about any given topic. And I think that's the people who are amazing, who can naturally go with the flow and, are just genuine and natural, rather than like people who are just going to fulfill this criteria of they worked here or they've worked there.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, Kareem. And it's really interesting you said that, because there's a lot going on. I suppose a lot what I'm hearing at the moment is I can't do training for my retail business, Louise, because we're really low in staff. The manager is left. We've gone through 3 managers. We're waiting to get in another store manager. Once we onboard that manager, there is a lot of kind of, there's a high turnover at the moment in retail, and for even from me from the outside and the inside working in retail, COVID changed where a lot of people that were in the retail business for more than 10-15 years actually changed career. From what I could see, a lot of that happened, and now we've so much experience gone out of the business. And what's happened with that is that we didn't actually train enough people in the business, so now that experience is left, we're kind of goosed a little bit because
100%. I did a post yesterday about the benefits of working and retail as a career. And I feel that people forget that people are very short-sighted in terms of a retail career means you standing in the store for 8 hours, unsociable hours. And yes, there is an element of that, right? That's genuine and true. But retail can, you can go into regional management, you can go into HR, you can go into marketing, you can go into visual merchandising, you can go into security, you can become a brand manager, you can go into buying and merchandising. There is so much going on there. And just like you've said, like when you lose, high talent, it does become more difficult, because retail, we keep coming back to it, is all about that people piece.
Yeah. And I think what you said there, I think that investment piece, I think I find it's not realized in the moment until someone leaves the business. And then what it's put down to is no, but we would be fine if they didn't leave. But no, you wouldn't, because when they go on sick leave, when something happens, the business comes to a standstill. And I always think, if you ever are overseeing a business, and if one person leaves that business and the brakes are put on and everything goes to a standstill, I mean, KPIs aren't being met, things aren't being done, then that business isn't really operating.
Yeah, it's a lack of succession plan and a lack of, employee engagement. Unfortunately, there's a lot of retailers who see training and development as a tick box exercise. They see, annual appraisals as a tick box exercise, and they don't, because they're not having those communications on a weekly basis, 5 minutes, let's go for coffee before we start, or whatever it may be, then they're not kind of really asking the employee, where do you want to go? Where do you want to be? There's so much you can do. Thankfully, I was in a company that did do that. But there's so many people where it's just like, you're just you're just working and you've got this sales target. Next month you've got that sales target. And they might engage them in terms of talking to them in terms of sales, but they're not really developing their people. So if you develop your team so that you're always thinking succession plan, this manager walks out the door, or gets promoted, and it's better to think of them getting promoted and going on to bigger and better things. Who's the next person to step up, and who's the next person to step up? And I think I worked, thankfully I worked in a culture where it was about that, and who's next, and they were opening stores left, right, and center. But I feel that these days it's almost like retailers, they spend a lot of money, they do one big annual kickoff, they blitz them with information. No way that the employees can learn all that information, absorb it in one go. There's no way. They'll spend a lot of money. It's like, okay, we tick the box, we've done the training. They've had the training, they've had their annual appraisal, but nothing in between. And that's where, these days people are conscious, and they've got their families kind of telling them, why are you doing this? You can work from home, or you can do this and you can do that. And that's where I think retail is really missing out.
Yeah. And I think retail, and we see it over here, there's retail apprenticeship programs and stuff. And I think that, there's a couple of posts that I've seen up from people that have run really successful businesses. One of them had a tech business worth, I think nearly $1 billion. And I seen a post he put up, and it was really interesting. He said that he learned a lot of his people skills by working in retail early on. And I think sometimes we tend to forget that, when you work in a retail environment, and you touched on it there, where we go onto the shop floor and we put on a show. Hello, it's and all of that, and you touched the word adapting, which I think is really, really important. We learn to adapt to different types of cultures, different types of personalities, different types of behaviors, and we use all of those skills, and those are really important people skills that you take on with you in life and in situations. And I think it is a craft, it is a skill, I think, that you cannot learn in a classroom. You cannot.
Yeah, there's no way that, a lot of people in retail, sometimes they leave retail as belittled. But I think if you worked in retail and you've gone, through the system and you've gone through the channels, you're so employable because you've got those people skills. You know how to deal with angry customers. You know how to deal with tough situations. You have to work quick. You have to be great customer service. Your, personal grooming, your hygiene, your eloquence. There's so many skills being developed, and I think it's underrated, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think for me, retail is always changing and evolving. And my hope would be that there is going to be a change where people are going to go, and I would love to see it, Kareem. Like, I really want to work in retail. I would love to see that.
Yeah. So, I think we need to be the ambassadors for that, and be proactive and get into schools. And my thing is all about saving the high street, but it's really about, if you're not operating at the grassroots level, for kids and the youth to come into retail and to take it forward, and yes, to embrace all of this technology and make stores of the future and make it interactive and make it cool and all that kind of stuff. That's how we're going to really re-educate, because retail employees, in the UK, I was looking at a statistic like for 2022, 20% of the population, and retail sales in 2022 as well, in a year which COVID was still around and stuff. It was responsible for 440 billion pounds of sale turnover. That is massive, right? And it's massive to the economy. The UK and Ireland, I guess, was called a nation of shopkeepers, and we're always going to want to buy products. Yes, some stores may not exist. The middle market is going to be difficult, but people will always go into the Selfridges and the aspirational designer brands. That value market is always going to be there. And then the choices for the rest of the retail world is kind of, are we going to be about our shopping experience? Are we going to raise our level? And that's what retailers really need to do. And for me, they need support with that, because as good as a regional manager is, they're just firefighting.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we touched on that as well, that perspective, that outside perspective, helping people see that, this is what it looks like. This is what, is so important. You touched on training and mentoring and coaching. In your own experience, has there been anyone that's kind of supported you in your journey or stood out to you?
Yeah, I've had, I've worked with many great leaders, and I think that's, made me the person I am today. But I like the leaders who have the tough conversations. I know there was one point where I'd won manager of the year. I'd been a store manager for a long time. I'd won manager of the year a couple of times, and I became kind of comfortable. And they said to me, Karim, you've grown as big as this piece of paper. Like, just imagine an A4 piece of paper. To now grow further, you need to come out of your comfort zone. You need to move to different areas. You need to move to different environments. You need to open your thinking. And at that time, I was kind of like, no, I'm king of Manchester. I love it. I'm training these. I'm virtually doing a regional manager's job without the regional manager title. And all I wanted to be was a regional manager. But they was like, no, I'm going to put you in London for a week. I want you to go there, and I just want you to open your mind and open your thinking. And because of that, and because I took that on board, having that hard feedback, which was honest and sincere and genuine, it really developed me. And now with the youth of today, I kind of feel like people shy away from that. Someone just can press an anxiety button or whatever, and people are not being told the truth. So I think, through that genuine, I was being coached at that time. And I was, I think some of us in the kind of older generation, we're used to having and dealing really well with really constructive feedback. Whereas today, in today's society and stuff, I think like people would find it more difficult to take that and have that growth mindset that they're going to develop and change.
Yeah, I think that's it's a really nice thing to hear. And I think what you said there, I think around giving that honest feedback and supporting you in your development, I think that's so important for teams, for leaders to have that support. And sometimes it is external coaches, sometimes it is Karim, people like you coming in and delivering the training and showing how it's done, that best practice piece. Before we go, is there any books that stood out to you? Is there anything that you maybe, if there's anyone listening here, that you would maybe recommend that has helped you on your journey?
Yeah, I've read loads of books. I think there's a book called Coaching for Performance by John Whitmore on the Grow model.
I know that book.
Yeah, that book is really, yeah, that book is really good. And it's, you can use that, instead of, telling people, this is really good, using that old sandwich technique. I think by asking people questions, what went well last week? What can you improve? That kind of stuff. By asking them the questions and then for them to come out with the answers, I think that's really a great book for them to kind of invest in and take action. Coaching doesn't need to take, there's this perception that coaching needs to take, and training needs to take hours and all that kind of stuff. No, it can be done in 5 minutes. It can be even done on the shop floor, which is probably where it's best done. And I think, that book has really opened my mindset. And yeah, I think it's a great book for people to read.
Okay, thank you so much, Karim. Karim, where can people find you? So we've talked a little bit today. Where's the best place to get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is my second home. So like I'm very focused. I know people have lots of different channels. I'm focused on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out to me and connect and have conversations, I'm there, and I'm there to support retail. I'm really passionate about my mission to save the high street, to get people into retail and kind of give back to the industry that's, taken me around the world.
Yeah, I love that. Save the high street. Thank you so much, Karim, for coming on today. Really, really appreciate it. And yeah, talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Louise. It's been a pleasure.